Now, we're at breakfast. We're in a restaurant, so I'm keeping my calm and cool. I asked him, do you know who he is? What's his name? He said, no, I don't know his name. I don't know who he is. And all those people are probably dead. We eat a little more breakfast, Bria. Now, watch this. 10 minutes later, all of a sudden, he remembers his name. And he gives me the man's full name.
You just needed a little mama's pancakes.
Granted, he's 85 years old. He's known his name the entire time.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Because I found out from him that I was born before he met Mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
and that's when I believe that's when I was in Oklahoma being raised by Encore. So he already knew of me, but hadn't seen me. And I was already born. And they met, I wasn't around.
So Grandpa, the man who raised you, came into a relationship with Grandma, knowing she had a son.
Right.
Okay. So that already, sets everything up to where he had a lot more information than he was letting on.
Agreed. Yeah. So that day, for whatever reason, when he gave me the name, I did not need anything else from him. Mm-hmm. It gave me the time, because with technology and information and Google, you can find anybody you want,
right,
and go out and look. Now, I'm 63 at the recording, at the time of this recording. He had already told me the man was an older man than my mom. So this man would possibly be in his 90s. He could or could not be alive right now. That's all I have right now. So I'm doing some due diligence to find out all of that. Your mom's been helping with that as well. But here's one of the things. When I got a name, believe it or not, that took a little bit of edge off my anger.
Okay.
I don't have a photo. I don't have anything else, but having a name took a little bit edge off. And when I walked away from that, because he was teary-eyed, he saw the pain and whatever. Now, he didn't know that I went through a state of depression behind this until I told him, because I separated myself from everybody. Nobody knew that I went through a state of depression over that. And depression is real, right? And being at my age here and never experienced that before, my heart goes out to everyone who's dealing with that. And not knowing who your father is, it can be very hurtful and painful for many years. That can cause depression. So my heart goes out to those who are dealing with this, who don't know their fathers, want to know their fathers. Some don't know their mothers. And the depressive state that comes upon them at times during birthdays, holidays, Christmases, whatever that is something that I can say, you know what? My heart goes out to you, and we see you, because when you don't know who your father is or your mother is, and you want that connection, you want to be validated by that loved one, it is a period of time where you feel very lonely.
Right.
So loneliness is something that actually just came around me as well, because you could be around 1,000 people and feel lonely, because it's never about who's around you. It's who's with you in your heart, who's with you in your spirit. Because not everybody can share a space of, you are my son, you are my daughter. So again, to those going through that, my heart is always going to go out to you.
It's a loaded experience. And I think that what I want to validate people listening that resonate with this story and with you is that you are going to experience all the emotions. Maybe it's a continual cycle, right? It's kind of similar to grief in a way. I think it's very similar to grief, especially everyone's situation is so different, right? Where some may never meet that parent or father. Some may, and some may be disappointed by meeting them. Some may meet them, and it is the happy ending that you wanted. You really don't know, but even then, if you had the happy ending that you wanted, there can still be feelings of lost time, of what if I grew up. There's just so many emotions that you're going to have to continually have to sift through and do a lot of maintenance work with and healing on. It's a never-ending journey. I just want to validate anyone that's watching that, it's tough for you guys. And while this is not a direct hit to me through Like I had a dad. I was fortunate to grow up with you who you've been very present. And even given the situation, still very present. But there is a trickle down effect, right? Especially now that I'm about to give birth to a grandson. I wonder, what life would have been like had we known his biological grandfather, or it would be great grandfather. So there's a hole in our family for all of us, right? And I think more of my emotions come from witnessing you. I don't feel as attached to the situation as you would. But I definitely have my feelings about this too.
Right.
And most of mine, I would say, are more protective in the sense of like, I don't like the way you've been treated during this situation at certain periods. I don't like how you were given the information. And I don't like, that there's kind of this isolation and no shade, no tea, but I don't love that we're not in therapy yet. I still really want that for you. I want you to take that initiative. I can't do it for you, but I really think that it would be productive for you and very healing.
100%. I agree with that, because there's some things you have to work through that, which is important. But I also want to add this, if I could. I can see why we have so many people who really don't feel validated. They don't feel like they matter, because when that trust went away, and this is very important for me, and maybe because in my older age when I found out, the identity piece was so important, and I think many of us, especially men, we don't know our true identity if we don't know who our fathers are. And that is the case for women as well. But when it comes to a man who said, who is my father? Now, that could be many scenarios where the father's not in your life, right? Whether your mom got pregnant by a man and they never stayed together, he could have passed away, or whatever the case may be, it still leaves a hole. And people try to fill that hole with things that are not good sometimes. But that hole cannot get filled until you have that connection of knowing who this person is, maybe interacting with this person. And let's also be honest, there's some fathers that you're not going to meet because they were in a terrible state, whether that's addiction or they're in prison, and that still leaves a hole in the child, and it's still hurtful because I don't know who he is. So we connect with people and things to fill that hole. For me, at an older age, I think it was one of the things that I look at you and I look at me. Let's tell the truth. You and I look like him. I don't look like your grandfather because he's not my father, and I don't look like your grandmother. So you and I resemble this man that we don't know.
And it's interesting because when we started to do some digging on ancestry, I was right about the last name. And this, I don't think I told you, it was probably Mom. But of course, at the time, I didn't know what his name was. But I found someone who was connected to my paternal side, who I said looked like you. Immediately. And I think too, when you're genetically connected to someone, you see the resemblance, like we are genetically able to spot family or connect with family. Like that's something we're able to spot. I immediately said, this looks like this could be Dad's brother or something. And I told Mom that, and no one really validated me on that. And then when you got the name, his last name was the same. Yeah. And so I saw it. And you're right. There are some features that we have that clearly resemble that side of the family that we don't know. So yeah, it's interesting going through life now, wondering what this man looks like, right? But also knowing that even though we don't, we're able to spot it and clock it.
Yeah, yeah. I want to also add that my turning point. The turning point, and this is very important what I'm going to say, after that breakfast with your grandfather and having that name, and then me doing the research and journey of that, it was very interesting to see. Do you know, I found out that this man lived within minutes from where I grew up at. He was in the same neighborhood. When I say that, he was less than 10 miles away from where I grew up. Shocking.
Wow. You probably ran into him at some point.
Probably have. I also want to add that when it turned from me, the anger went away and the unforgiveness went away to the point that I have a good conversation with him. He is my dad that raised me. That is the man that raised me. The biological father is a biological father, but the man that raised me for the first 20 years of my life until I left home, well, 19 years, that is the dad. That is my father.
And I think it's important to say as well, like, you know, that's, we all feel that way. That is my grandpa.
Right.
That's the only grandpa that I know.
That's the only one you know.
He has played the role. He's done an incredible job of being that. And he was a great dad to you. You know, that doesn't change anything.
No.
It is now like we have this separate piece of wanting that information, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a slight on anybody. We still 100% own that is the father figure we've had and the grandfather figure we've had.
And the other side of knowing the biological father's name is we know that there are children. That means I have siblings out there.
Wait,
you know,
really? I didn't
there's the children out there.
How do you know
that he's had that are out there. So to date, I'm aware of two of them. So I'm still doing my research. Kind of have to pump the brakes for a little bit because it could be exhausting. It just going through this so long, you just like, and then you have to be very careful about how you proceed with people. But in God's timing, I'm going to get more information.
Yeah.
And those I'm supposed to know, I will see that and have that. The closure side of that, I don't think we can say I'm going to go into closure. I can say I'm in a good place today where I can communicate with dad. I can communicate with the siblings because now that wall has come down to say I don't want to communicate with you because I don't trust you. Do I trust people 100%? I'm just going to put it out there and say no.
Yeah, you're 100% jaded now.
Yeah.
Let's just own it. We have some
I can't
we have
say
some
that.
trust issues.
Yeah, when it comes to this particular area here, now I know they love me. I love them. I grew up with them.
Yeah,
they
but
are
rightfully
family.
so,
Yeah.
you have trust issues for valid reasons. And that's another reason why I think it's important that you talk to a professional through all of this, because you don't want every interaction now moving forward to be this like wall type of thing. So yeah, like I think that's totally fair. And with the closure aspect of it, I really think this is an important piece, not just for you, but for those watching who can resonate. Not getting closure in the situation. Well, let me ask you this. Do you have a version of closure in your mind where does that look like meeting him? Does that look like getting the information? Is there something that would feel like closure for you with this?
That would probably be an assumption until I meet the person. Here's why. Meeting the biological father would probably give me a piece of closure of who he is, and then I can shake his hand, give him a hug, and have a conversation about who he is and his life journey and what happened then. Then there's the closure piece on we don't know, because your grandmother's dead, of the why. What happened? Why was I here for a year? There's. I think it's a journey that I won't have the total closure, but to meet him will be a good portion of that. And then to say, hey, I know you. And do we have to, or will we have a relationship going forward? Because some people might say, hey, it's nice to meet you, but because of this, I can only give you this. So I don't know where that person would be. Because you got to remember, this is a man married with children. And would I have access to that family, those siblings, and they feel okay with it? Because for them, they may not know who I am. And all of a sudden, I'm showing them going, hey, I'm your son, and they don't know about me. So I have to consider those feelings. So to see him, that would be a piece of it. I don't think we can say 100%, but there's a story that I don't know because your grandmother is not here. And your grandfather don't know that story. That's the thing about it. He met her. I was already born.
He was given as much information as he was given. And I do want to say this in regards to Grandpa, the man who raised you. I have so much grace for him, and I know you do too. Because
now I do. I didn't before.
I know.
Because I was blaming him. It's like, you should have been man enough to tell me.
I don't think that's fair, Dad. And that's fine that you say that. That's fine that you say that. But because that's your feelings.
Right.
But I don't think that's fair. This was never his cross to bear.
I'm just giving you my truth.
That's your truth and that's your opinion. But I also feel like he deserves a lot more grace in the situation because it was never his cross to bear.
Now I can give that grace. I didn't have it.
Totally.
I didn't see it.
Totally. Yeah. And that's fair. You had to go through that journey and you had to, what I keep telling you too is like perspective. Perspective is everything. If you were in that situation and mom wasn't here and one of us, like, you know, you would eventually tell us, but I think he wanted to honor your mom and her truth. And it should have never been his job to tell you.
He did. He said, that's one of the things he did. He said, I want to honor your mother.
It's just not fair. It's not fair to him that he had to be left with the responsibility of telling you and feeling like he was destroying your life. Like, that's not fair to him. So I feel a lot of compassion towards him, and I can understand where your frustration comes from because you asked, he didn't tell you, but at the same time, like, it's a lot. It is a lot to have to grapple with, and it was unfair. Mm-hmm. It's everyone involved that isn't your mom or isn't your biological dad. This is unfair to everyone.
Yeah.
So that's my piece on that. But I do think the closure aspect is something that, you know, it's not going to be a guarantee. And I think since this is happening in a time where the main source of information, like your mother, isn't here to validate a lot of things, we may never more than likely get that. But something I did want to talk about is healthy ways to move forward with not having full closure. Because while we may get some closure and information, and maybe we find out the siblings, we might not get to meet him, your biological dad, because we have no idea if he's living or dead. That's a big piece we have to find out first, right? Mm-hmm. In his 90s, like, he would have to be kicking, right? And I pray that he is, you know, so that we have that opportunity, and God willing, we'll get to meet him. But there are some things, even for me, that, like, I'm trying to process through too with this information in terms of not being able to get that closure for you, watching you not get that closure, and also not having closure for myself. Because you have to remember, and I know it's hard to remember, what you're going through. I'm in the background going through it with you, right? Jay's going through it with you. You know, this is the men in our family who are directly connected to you are going to be impacted by this. Baby bestie is going through it with you. Okay, you're not alone in going through this experience. We are all going through it with you. So something that I have started to do in my own journey with this, because I don't want to focus on my feelings with this, but I want to make sure you understand that you are directly impacted, and it is impacting us too. And I think the first step in understanding that closure is not always possible is first accepting that pain. And like I said earlier, kind of going through that grieving process, right? And I liked to use grieving process because grief never ends. Grief never has an expiration date. When you lose somebody, you forever miss that person, right? Or if you're grieving a relationship or if you're grieving an experience, it's like a cycle, right? And so with something like this, it's definitely going to be a cycle for all of us. Mm-hmm. There may come a time where baby Bessie has questions, and that kind of opens the wound where we have to like re-acknowledge that pain and explain to him something happened down the road that is going to impact you too. We don't know who that man is. Okay, but here's what we do know, right? So we have to accept that pain and learn how to move through it, right? Another thing that I think has been helpful in this situation is shifting the focus. Instead of focusing on the lack of, focusing on what was there, right? You had a father figure who was present, mm-hmm. Okay? Of course, there were lies involved in that, but you had a man who stepped up in your life, who did not have to. And knowing how you were as a teenager and knowing how much of a hothead you were in your young adult years, you guys butt heads. Mm-hmm. This man could have aired your stuff out when he was mad at you. He never did. And you know how heated those arguments could have been. You know, you said it. You guys were dysfunctional. That family was dysfunctional. He had so many opportunities to break you with one comment, and he didn't. So I think that, you know, as cheesy as it sounds for something that's so traumatic, the cup half full. Just the amount of love that you were given and the amount of love that our family has been given despite this is really admirable and special, mm-hmm. and should be focused on too. Yeah. Because not only did they love you enough to still treat you exactly the same, they loved your mom enough to protect her.
Right.
From something where we don't know the story, right? We don't have context, but they respected her enough to say, we're going to zip it, right? So shifting your focus. Another thing that I think is important is forgiveness, which you've done a lot of that.
Yeah.
You've been so big about that. You've been a great example to me in doing that because your Scorpio daughter does not forgive easily, okay? I definitely, especially witnessing you going through this, like I've said, one of the hardest things for me in this experience is watching how you've been treated. I didn't like how things happened for you. And so you have been able to forgive people who did you wrong more than I have. Because I see those people and I get upset still. Just the protective nature or whatever, but I'm like arm's length. And you've done a good job of forgiving people, but you've also done a good job of setting your boundaries with those same people.
I think here's the thing about it. Forgiveness is hard. Let's just be honest about it. Because first of all, they hurt me. They lied to me. Why should I forgive them? Some people make a decision that I'm not going to forgive them, but let me tell you why it's important to forgive. Mm-hmm. First of all, when you have, let's just say from my experience, when I had unforgiveness, I only stayed mad. And when you stay mad, you cause problems in other areas and other relationships in your life. You explode, or you have lack of patience. You say things that you shouldn't. You do things that you shouldn't. You eat things that you shouldn't. You drink things that you shouldn't. The indulgence may go up. But here's the thing of why it was important to me. First of all, I know a loving God that forgives me and gives me grace and mercy. But at the time, I was not thinking about that. And forgiveness is not for them. Forgiveness is for you because you stay in an emotional prison. Mm-hmm. And you have the key to get out of that prison of unforgiveness. Until you turn that key and make a decision to say no more, I am not going to hold this bitterness, anger against them. And mind you, sometimes that can affect your body, right? That can affect your body as well, your health as well. So let's be very, very clear. Unforgiveness is not healthy. Now, is it easy?
Unforgiveness is poison.
It's not healthy. But until you make a mental decision, it's not a two-step process. It starts here. We say, I've made a decision first. Let it flow, the authenticity of being a person to forgive those, and it will flow once you make a decision. I choose to forgive.
And I think it's important to separate a couple things here. Forgiveness is giving yourself freedom back, right? It's giving yourself the control back.
That's coming out of the prison, yes.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that now you've got to let these people back into your life. That's not necessarily what forgiveness is.
Very true. And you have to make sure that you know how and when and who to say, I'm going to allow you here in this space. This space, I'm not.
Or not at all.
Or
and
not
that's
at all.
Okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you forget.
Right.
It just means I forgive, but never toss it back in a person's face. Because if you bring it back in a person's face, often you did and you said and whatever, you haven't
forgiven them. You're still holding it over their head.
You're still holding it over their heads.
Forgiveness is saying, I understand what happened. I forgive you. If there was an apology, I accept that. And I'm ready to move on for myself. It is a you first choice. And then from there, you decide what that relationship looks like. And if you were to cut these people off, just for anyone watching, it doesn't mean you didn't forgive them. It means you forgave them, you want to move on, but you're taking that information and choosing to do what's best for you in the future. So these are separate things. They say forgive and forget. Like, these are two separate concepts. You can forgive. You don't have to forget. You can remember, hey, this happened. I have a boundary now. That's the next step of this relationship. Or there may not even be that. And that's kind of my next point was, in a situation like this where you may not have closure, you have to set boundaries. And we saw that you did that at one point when you were processing things where you didn't talk to anybody in your immediate family. And that was a temporary decision that you made so that you could get through things. You needed some distance.
Right.
Okay? You were severely hurt by the choices that the people closest to you made, and it was incredibly valid. So you needed to create some healthy distance so that you could hear your own thoughts. And I think that was a great choice for you. And now you're able to have a healthy dynamic with these people, but it took you a minute.
Prayer helped me also. I'm just going to say, without prayer, I would not be probably sitting here with you right now. That is definitely something that helped me.
Absolutely. And then I think too, outside of creating boundaries, something that helps with, the possibility of not having closure or whatever moving forward is embracing the unknown, which you've had to do a lot of that. And I always, when we talk about this subject, I always kind of go back. I think a lot about grandma. I try to, because especially as a mom, I'm such a mom now. I'm just saying, especially as someone who's about to be a mom, I really feel like I am trying to understand her thought process. And the maternal side of this is this thing. And while we'll never have the answers, I don't want to make assumptions. What I have been doing is giving her the benefit of the doubt because we know her character. She was great. She was an angel, sweet as pie, quiet little thing. Like, she made this choice and we don't have the context. Okay. So I've embraced the unknown here in saying she was a mom. She knew something we didn't. I'm going to give her that benefit of the doubt that she made a choice that we may never understand, but she thought it was the best choice at the time.
Yeah. And let's add this. It cannot be easy to give your first child to your sister to raise you.
Right.
So it had to be pretty serious.
Had to be traumatic. I can't imagine going through 9 months with this baby in my belly, feeling the kicks and everything.
Yeah.
And then even moms who give their children up for adoption, I've never heard a story where it's not a traumatic experience or it's not hard. There's going to be some psychological, emotional, mental, just terrible element to that. And it could not have been easy, but she was clearly in a situation where she knew you being with her was not the best idea.
Right.
And she still, obviously, like, she got you back.
Right.
It wasn't like a permanent situation, right? So for whatever reason, that was her choice. And I've been able to embrace feeling a lot of comfort in being like, she did what was best. And I'm going to trust that. And I feel that on an intuitive level. I feel that on just like a spiritual level. Okay. And then I think the latter part of this whole thing is when you go through a situation like this, you talked a lot about identity. You have to go through building your identity and your self-worth without something now. You can't let this consume you and say, I'm not worth like having a dad, or you can't turn it into that narrative. You have to now learn how to validate yourself in other ways. And so building your self-worth and your self-confidence without that closure, if we don't get it, is going to be really essential. And I think that's going to obviously take some creativity. It's going to take some we'll have to reflect on what that looks like, right? But I think part of building your identity when you don't have someone who you feel is a part of it is creating that identity for yourself and for future generations. Like now you're going to have a grandson and you're able to build your identity with him, right?
True.
There are many ways to do it, is my point.
And I want to make sure I'm very clear about this. Knowing that information at that time and not knowing who this man is, that's a portion of it. But Carlos, the man, the father, soon to be grandfather, I always stand strong in who I am, very comfortable in my manhood of who I am. And if anyone knows me, you know me. This is not something that I would say that's going to take me out forever, because I didn't find this out to my later years.
Right. And I think that's important to say is that, and that's like part of me saying, looking at the glass half full here, is you did get this information when you're pretty sure of yourself in life, right? Like you're not in your 20s getting this information where it probably would have knocked you off course.
Had 3 kids already, right? And then this information came here.
You're pretty sure of who you are by the time you got this information. And I'm sorry not to cut you off. I'm saying this as a statement to the general public that may be experiencing something, whether it's closure through something as traumatic as not knowing your father, or whether it's closure through a breakup that you may never get closure through that breakup.
Very true.
This is just general advice, not to you specifically, to make that clear. But yes, I think one of the benefits of your age is that you don't have any soul searching to do. I mean, you always can, but you're not like, man, I gotta find myself now that I don't know this guy. Like, you're not going to Bali. You're not going to get like all these tattoos now to like find yourself. Like, you're good. Really, your focus is going through this process now. Yeah. And figuring out, can you find this man or not?
And I'm hoping my journey and those that watch this, folks can start healing themselves. And for whatever reason, you know, you and I have a close relationship. Growing up, I was always protective of the siblings. Always, especially my sisters, always protective. I've always had a protective nature. You guys still call me helicopter dad. But for whatever reason, while we're having this conversation, girls and women keep coming up in my heart here, and I want to say that
Well, that's mostly who you're talking to right now.
Yeah, well, and then then thanks for validating that, because it is already tough for young girls and women tend to marry their fathers, right? Or someone close to their father. And as we're sitting here, and I'm glad you told me that's your audience here, because I didn't think about it, I kept getting in my heart about the young ladies who may be going through this. So thanks for validating your audience. And it is tough for a young girl, a teenager, a young woman, kind of to find the right man if she didn't have a model to look to. And I just want to say, I validate all of the young women looking that they would heal from this. They would validate themselves. They would encourage themselves. And they would know that they are loved, they are validated, they are beautiful, they are smart, they are awesome, and build on who God has made you to be, because you matter. You don't have to settle for any type of man. You don't have to settle for who's not right for you because they paid attention to you, but they're not good for you. You don't have to settle for the one who abuses you and takes advantage of you because you didn't have a father figure to look to, or what a real man looks like. So my heart goes out to you. God is for you, and God does not create junk. So you are awesome in yourself. I just had to share that.
Yeah. So hopefully if you needed to hear that, that message is for you. But speaking of our audience, we have some submissions.
Okay.
That we're going to go through. Obviously, this is a really hard subject for a lot of people, but it's also really common. And I wanted to just touch on a few stats around this specific issue. Something I found interesting was that 1 in 4 children grow up without a biological father. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, about 24% of children in the U.S. grow up without a biological father in the household, whether that's through divorce, separation, or other circumstances. I did not realize that number was so high.
That's high.
That is insane. 1 out of 4 people is experiencing similar to you in some capacity. So to that point, not that it makes anything better, but there are so many people who can relate to your story, and it's not that it makes it better. It's just you're not alone in this. There's a lot of people who could use community and knowing other people are going through this, navigating romantic relationships, without a biological father in the household. Like, there are people who get this, and I'm sure that there are resources that you can look into, because regardless of your circumstance, I want to remind you, anyone who relates to the situation, you can live a happy, healthy, balanced life regardless of where you've come from or what's happened to you. It might take a little bit more work, but you can. There's somebody out there who's done it. Yeah. And there's community out there. So I encourage you to find that community to work through situations like this. That's going to be really, really helpful in your journey. Another stat that I wanted to share was that around 1 in 25 people discover their father isn't their biological father. That number to me is still really high. 1 in 25 people. That's like one classroom. Okay. A study from the American Society of Human Genetics found that approximately 4% of people discover, often later in life, that their father isn't their biological dad. So interesting to me that it's the later in life thing too that they specifically said here. Mm-hmm. And I was on the way here. We drove together. I was telling my dad how these DNA kits are opening a lot of can of worms for people. Right. You get this little ancestry DNA kit or whatever the test is called, and something comes back and you're realizing, hang on, why is it saying half sibling for me and full sibling for you? That's got to be a fluke. In fact, we have a submission that is exactly like that we're going to read through. So I just wanted to touch on those statistics because I think that it is incredibly wild to see how high those numbers are. But at the same time, I think that's also an opportunity to look into how can you move forward with a sense of community. How can you tap into resources?
Right.
There's going to be therapists who specifically work with people who have gone through something like this because there is a need.
Right.
Okay.
I'm so excited to meet baby bestie, and I can't believe we're just a few short weeks away from all of it. As I'm nesting, I'm entirely focused on what's going to make my life easier with a newborn. I recently found out there's this brand called Magnetic Me. The fabric on these clothes are so soft, but the cool part is that everything has magnetic closures. It apparently saves so much time during night and day changes and replaces the hassle of snaps and zippers. I think I'm most nervous about what nights are going to look like with a newborn, especially while we try to find a routine. We're going to need every minute of sleep once he arrives, and with how quick and easy changes can be with Magnetic Me, we can squeeze in those precious few more minutes of sleep because truly, every minute matters during that time. I can't wait to dress my baby with Magnetic Me. And trust me, you need to order these for your baby too. Make your life a little bit easier. Go to magneticme.com today and new customers will get 15% off their order. Don't wait. That's magneticme.com.
The first submission we have here is titled, "My Mother Kept My Father Away from Me." So this says, I spent 23 years of my life thinking my father had just disappeared. I was the kid who asked, "Where's my dad?" and would always get the same answer, "He left us. He didn't want a family." It was a lot to swallow as a child. I blamed myself for why he left. I didn't know there was another version of the story. One where my dad wasn't the villain who had just walked away. He sadly never had the chance to tell his side. Last year, I stumbled upon a box of old letters in my mom's closet. The letters were from my dad. So many of them written to my mom over the years, begging her to let him see me. He wanted to be a part of my life. He wasn't a stranger who abandoned us. He was a man who loved me from a distance and fought to be in my life. There were even a few where he talked about how devastated he was that she wouldn't let him see me. So I realized my mom had lied to me. It wasn't that my dad didn't want me. It was that she didn't want me to have him. And for what? Now I was seeing her for what she really was. A woman who was willing to sacrifice my happiness, my relationship with my father, for her own ego. Eventually, I decided to reach out to him, and he was exactly how I imagined, only better. He didn't hold any grudges against my mom. He didn't make me feel guilty for the years we'd lost. He just wanted to be there. He wanted to know me. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a powerful situation there. I'm glad, she got a chance to finally meet her dad, and they can grow together and share things together. He can be there with her for her wedding and birth of her children. The mom situation, again, I go back to the betrayal and the trust that I dealt with, the lies.
Yeah.
And you have to forgive that person in your own time because children need their fathers.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
No matter how you feel about the man, no matter how you don't like what he's done or did or whatever he didn't do, but if there is a man who is the biological father of your children and they want to be a part of their lives, make that work somehow. You may.
Well, and I hear you on that. But I also think it's important to understand there are a lot of circumstances where maybe it might not be safe. It might not be an option. But I do think in this case particularly,
in that case there, it doesn't sound like that's the case.
Right. In this case particularly, it sounds like mom had some issues that she needed to work through. She needed to let go. And now this has heavily impacted this person who submitted this confession, which breaks my heart because I do think there are a lot of moms who can be good moms in every capacity, but drop the ball in not realizing how damaging it is to not prioritize your child's relationship with the father because of your petty beef with him.
Right.
Because he didn't want to marry you or because he cheated during your pregnancy. That's not what it's about. It's about the kid.
Exactly.
And it takes a lot of maturity to separate yourself from whatever BS has happened with you and the baby's father.
Yeah.
So that you can coexist and there can at least be a relationship for that child with their dad.
And you know, I want to give a shout out to this person who submitted that. She had the courage to tell her story here. Even after she met her father, she could say, hey, I'm done. I don't have this. But it's important because what we're hearing right here from her is the story of a lot of children where that has happened to, where the parent has kept the child away from the father. So I just say, you know, my hat's off to you for telling your story, and thank you for submitting that because it's going to help other folks heal. How that relationship goes forward with the daddy is going to be very, very blessed.
Yeah, I think that's a great ending, and it's optimistic in the sense that now you can make up for as much time as you possibly can, right? You don't want to focus on the past and like what could have been. I think it's so great because obviously there are situations where you might never get that closure, just like we were saying. But this person is very fortunate in the sense that the information came when it needed to, and they took action and were able to get in contact.
And he forgave her mom.
Mm-hmm.
So that is powerful.
Yeah, he didn't hold the grudge with her.
Hopefully she can do that if she hadn't already. Do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I hope so. For your sake, for your well-being, that eventually that forgiveness comes. But that's a tough pill to swallow. And we were just talking about that I showed my dad Tyler, the Creator's new song, Like Him. And, you know, there's that bit at the end, the voicemail.
Yeah.
Or whatever the recording was. Tyler, the Creator, same situation. It sounds like his mom kept him from his biological dad.
Yeah.
And she ends up admitting at the end of the song, he's a good dude. Don't hold it against him. That was on me.
Yeah.
I apologize. I'm sorry. So this is a really common thing amongst a lot of people, unfortunately. So the next one we have here is titled, The Affair That Ruined My Love Life. I was just 12 years old when I watched my dad break my mom's heart. One night I was in bed pretending to sleep when I overheard the conversation. His voice was low while he spoke to someone over the phone and said things I knew weren't right even at my young age. I instantly knew he was doing something wrong and behind my mom's back, even though I wasn't sure what it was. As a child, it put me in a tough situation, and I said nothing and convinced myself that I heard wrong. Fast forward, and one day, my dad and I went to pick up one of his friends. It was a woman, and again, I was young, but I knew they were flirty and something was off. My dad didn't think I was old enough to pick up on anything, but I instantly knew she must have been the other woman. After this, he got more confident with what he was doing, and it crushed me because I didn't tell my mom because I was afraid. Like everything, it all came to light eventually, but my mom stayed with him and just dealt with the misery and heartache, while my dad began to live like a bachelor. Now I'm an adult, and now my relationships are a disaster. I can't help but expect betrayal. That's what happens when you see the person you're supposed to trust the most shatter everything. I have a track record of dating people who usually cheat on me, or worse, just keep me at arm's length. But I think that this situation has impacted me for the worst.
That story is one of the male will model being a man before the children. Children will model what they see. And then it's one of those things that this person knew at a young age that it was wrong, but couldn't say anything.
Right. Kids can pick up even before kids understand, like, oh, this is explicitly just not right.
Yeah.
They can pick up on energy of situations and know, like, something feels dirty.
Right. So he is modeling something that is not right. He's
Right.
modeling something that is he's not honoring his marriage. He's not honoring his family.
Yeah, and just the audacity. I mean, I feel so bad for this person who had to witness it. Like, it's one thing to make the decision as an adult, right?
Yeah.
And say, I'm going to go and betray my marriage. But to have your kid in the backseat of the car while you do that is just beyond belief. And I think also speaks to, like, you know, women obviously understand with kids, they get a lot of things before you really think they do. And I think some men don't understand that about children, is like, they understand more. Just they might not even be potty trained.
Yeah.
But they know what's happening. They know they are so heavily impacted, especially at those younger ages. It sticks with you. Just, I mean, clearly.
And if I can add to that, the person has been honest enough, and I love what this person has been transparent about, is I've seen this, and now here is how my relationships have been with people, because I've been a witness to this. And I think that speaks volume to how men raise their children, how they are they are the model of an adult man when these are your children, and how they would grow and live their lives. So,
Yeah, and I also think, too, not to bring mom down in the situation, but her response to this also created a rule for this person, right? Mom could have said, absolutely not, you know, and I have so much empathy for mom in the situation. I want to make that clear. But it's not just the person who caused the pain. It's the person receiving and how they respond to that teaches the child, right?
You're saying mom knew it and she allowed it and did nothing about it.
She taught her kids, too, through that, right?
Okay.
Both parents are responsible for their choices and their responses, right?
Yeah.
Because for me, if this happened to me, yes, I would understand, like, I have a choice to stay or leave, but I also understand my kids watching how I respond to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if I had a little girl, right? That would just hit me on such a deep level of being like, I don't want anyone, my daughter, to ever think this is okay, right? And that's just saying, look, the decision is not easy, right? Plenty of people stay in situations like this.
Exactly. They make it work and maybe go to marriage counselor. But if I can add to that, back to this person looking at the father, obviously there's still some things that need to be dealt with, right? Maybe there's therapy. I don't know. But let Carlos sit there in that chair. Let's say you came to me, Bria, and you said, Dad, I saw you do this at age 12. I'm going to take him out. This is me. So and I saw you with this woman at age 12, and I heard you on a conversation with this woman. And then you come to me, Bria, and you tell me at age 25 or 30 and whatnot. The thing that I would do is I would apologize to you for being that type of person in front of you. I would apologize. I would ask your forgiveness. And then, watch this, you're probably not going to like what I'm going to say. I will repent to God for that, because I did the wrong thing as a husband, as a father, that my child was a witness to that. So I'm not telling him what to do. This is what I would do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great place to start. If this person wanted to, you know, start healing that relationship with
Go tell Dad I saw it.
With their dad, yeah. And, you know, you would have to also hope that they have the kind of dad where he would take accountability, because he could also be like, mind your own business. Like, you know, grown folks doing grown folks things. Like,
exactly. Especially those my age or older. But would that be closure for the person? We don't know.
No, but I think it's great that you gave the example.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. Next one is titled My 16th Birthday. The first time I met my dad was on my 16th birthday when he showed up unexpectedly. We didn't say much at first. He was a man who'd been in and out of rehab. a man who had no place in my life. I wasn't the only one who been hidden away. He had kept his distance too, running from his own mistakes. As the conversation unfolded, I realized why my mom had done what she did. She had been protecting me, not from him, but from his destruction. She protected his character, knowing he had a drug problem, but she actually kept that away from me, and I appreciate it. He somehow convinced her that he was in a good enough place to finally meet me, and we attempted to start a relationship from there. But about a year and a half in, he relapsed, and we were right back at square one, where I instantly understood why my mom kept me from him. She didn't want him to break my heart. So I thought this one was really important to share, because I feel like it does, like kind of what I was saying with how I think of grandma. And I'm not saying like your biological dad had like an issue with drugs. I'm just saying there could have been a piece to the story that we're missing. Mm-hmm. Just like she never told her daughter, like, your dad has a drug problem. That's why he's not in the picture. Because until you deal with someone who has a drug problem, she may not have thought that was a good enough reason. She'd be like, so, like, he'll get through it. Or, you know, people who have to deal with drug addicts go through a lot of heartache over and over and over again. So I say hats off to this mom in that situation. She protected his character too.
100%. Yeah. Shout out to her for not ruining his name.
Right.
You know, to the child. So shout
and
out.
Clearly, like, you know, when he's sober, it sounds like he can be a good dad. So
addiction is a disease, right? And you know, we don't make excuses for folks, but it is a disease, and he's tried and whatnot. So this is going to be a journey, or is a journey for this person. Again, we thank you for sending that in, because that's hard to write that story. Again, shout out to the mom for not putting him down for that disease of addiction. Now, how can you build a relationship with a person who's struggling just to live, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where the grace, the mercy, the forgiveness, many times over, of having forgiveness. They say, I'm not going to do it. They do it again. I'm not going to do it. And that happens again. So mom went through a journey with him as well.
Yeah, she probably has her own story with him, where she was like, I'll be damned if you do that to my kid.
Exactly. So enough is enough. So that was probably tough to draw the line and say, enough, we can't do this anymore until you get some help. Until you want some help, we'll let you back in. So, you know, we just hope that, you know, that family would heal. He would be broken from addiction. And if I can offer this to the person who wrote that in, if you're not already, and which I'm sure you are, just keep praying for your dad, that he would be delivered from substance abuse.
So the next one is titled, My Dad Reached Out 20 Years Later. I had no relationship with my dad for years, and honestly had developed a lot of resentment for him. He missed everything, all the birthdays, dances, games, and I was angry about it. 20 years later, when I'm in a great place with my life and work, he reached out to try to reconcile. I was hesitant, but I started connecting with him and developing a relationship. Eventually, I was comfortable enough for us to go to lunch, and we had a very good conversation with lots of tears. At the end, before we parted ways, he asked me for money, and it sent me into a rage. I think he had a plan all along and knew I was doing well, and I figured this was too good to be true. You're not getting off on the right foot with the kid you haven't talked to in 20 years, you know, going to give your sob story and then sticking your palm out. It's not a good look, 100%. Even if it is that you really do need the help or the money, it's just a terrible look. And it sounds like from the jump, this person already had a lot of anger and resentment. And, you know, he's like, here's your one chance. Got him all buttered up. We have a good conversation. And he knows you're doing good in life. And then, hey, you want to spot me some money? Like, I'd be pissed too. Because I would hope that, like, after 20 years, the relationship would be a priority. And it's like, even for me, it's not that like we couldn't get to a point of saying, hey, let me help you out with rent. Like, let me help you here and there. But let me make that decision in due time. Let's just get on our 2 feet with this relationship. I think, yeah, it's super inappropriate.
Yeah, he's right here. Going back to trust. does she trust them anymore
Yeah.
after that? When we do come together, what's your motive here? You have something that you want. And this is very important to say. When you have a situation like that and you go through that, and the person says, I want to see you again. You don't know if you want to see me or if you want something from me. So the trust factor is so broken. And I think, fathers, you have to learn when you hurt your children to build the trust back up. You have to earn the trust with your children. Just because they're your children does not mean that they have to trust you. When you break that trust, be man enough to work on it. Get yourself together. Get with your children. Love them for who they are, where they are, and you build their trust. They don't owe you anything. God gave you children as a gift. Work on your relationship with your children, because when you work on that, things fall in line from you, and you're only going to be blessed. You'll be blessed with the children and the grandchildren. So work on the trust that you've broken with your children, fathers.
Yeah, 100%. Parents have to understand that your kids owe you nothing. And that was a big thing that you said, because I think that there can be that mistake in looking at your kid as like, I don't owe them an explanation for the hurt that I cause. They're the child, right? I'm the adult. And you can move forward with that mentality, but just understand how damaging it is to your relationship with that child. If you want to have a healthy relationship with your child, you have to have a level of respect for your child. And that's crazy to say, especially to like people who are in the boomer community. Respect my child. Like, don't combust. But understand that in every capacity, respect is mutual. And especially as your children get older and become adults, if that mutual respect is not there, the relationship is going to suffer. And it's a choice. It's up to you, but you make that decision. So I think that was great. Next up, we have this submission titled The Gift from Hell. Christmas Eve of 2021, we usually have a family tradition of opening our stocking stuffers. So my sister had gifted the entire family those DNA kits so we can see where our family comes from. This is the one I was talking about. We had been talking about doing this for a while, so we were all really excited. We had a great holiday, and I almost forgot we sent those tests in until my sister called me at an odd hour and asked me if I was at home alone to sit down. I thought she was going to tell me someone died, but she proceeded to tell me the results came back, and it was showing that we weren't fully related.
Wow.
The man that had been my father figure was not even biologically related to me. My sister and I were both in denial and thought the test must be messed up. But we ended up confronting my parents, and that's when my mom fully confessed that she was never really sure if I was his. Wow. So not only was I crushed, the man I thought was my dad also was blindsided. It's been a few years, and it's still a sore subject that we are having a hard time navigating.
Wow.
Ouch. Like a dagger to the heart. And this is exactly what I was talking about. I was like, especially when Ancestry was first popular, like, I remember we were in Kansas City and everybody was taking those DNA tests, posting their results on Instagram and whatever. The last thing I would ever think about is like, oh, like you could find out someone's not related to you through this test. Like everyone just wanted to know their genetic breakdown. This is actually crazy that you're just like, la la la, Merry Christmas, everyone swab your mouth. And then you open up the results and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
And poor dad, also being blindsided. And the mom now confessing her sins. I didn't know. I didn't know. So, and what I pieced together from this person has an older sister. So they're like younger. So this had to be like, was this an affair? It's messy. It's messy. She doesn't obviously get into that if it was, but wow.
That's a really tough one, because that's one where you will probably want to do some family therapy, right?
You're going to
marriage
need a lot
therapy,
of therapy,
family therapy.
Yeah.
But how do you move on from there? I don't have that answer, and maybe there's a rebuilding and there's some forgiveness going on there. But look at Dad, poor Dad. Just blindsided by, like you said, the Christmas gift from hell. And hello, and you wake up to that.
Yeah.
I just hope and pray that these guys can, get some help for this, professional help, right? And then there's a path forward for healing and then some forgiveness. But that is a tough story.
Yeah.
How do you go on with that? So, we're just saying, hey, be strong and trust that God has something for you and the family.
Yeah, 100%. That's a really difficult thing to have to move through.
Right.
And there's, again, a lot of pieces to processing something of this nature.
A lot of healing. That's some deep healing that has to happen.
100%. But yeah, thank you guys for sending in your submissions as usual. This has been a really special episode. We've never done something like this where it's kind of like a 2-part series and really get into someone's story. So if you liked this format, let us know in the comments. And of course, to support the show, if you like this episode and our other episodes, make sure you rated us 5 stars. Leave us a 5-star review. It really helps the show out. And if there were any sponsors today, check them out. They'll be in the description. Click some links. It helps us out. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap?
I just want to encourage all of those who are still looking to find their fathers one day with the hope that we will have a great relationship. Don't stop hoping. You never know when your father would come into your life. Even your mother. I have to say, can't leave out. Some people don't know who their mothers are. Don't stop thinking that you will never meet that person. Keep that hope. But also, I want you to start believing in yourself. I want you to know that you matter. No matter who's not in your life, you're important, you're valuable, you matter, and you need to be your authentic self in order to be the person that God has created you to be. So stay in faith, stay hopeful, because you never know. You're one phone call away, one text, email away from maybe meeting that person you would call your father or your mother. So be blessed, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, thanks for joining the podcast. And again, if you enjoyed this, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. And as per usual, I will see you guys next week. Love ya.